oh, let's go to the movie theater. Like, well, let's be fancy today. Let's go to the movie theater.
Cinema.
Go to the cinema. I'm going to put on the top hat and the bow ties.
Yes,
I've brought out Mother's Best for this. It's quite a special occasion.
All right.
We're ready.
Cool. Well, welcome everybody to a brand new thing called the Unreal Podcast. As you can see on the wall, we're going to podcast things mostly in pertaining to theater and film. Today we have here, I'm Paul, as you probably already know because I've been in like everything. This here is John, and we've got Lindsay over there as our guest for this one, or guests are just people on this particular episode. Today we're going to be discussing about, as we've written up here, and as John has drawn on beautifully for us, a camera of old times.
A camera of the old times.
Camera of the old times with the film. We're going to talk about kind of the future of the things, the entertainment industry.
Yes.
Yeah, entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Because how things have gone from theater to film, so too film may go the byways, but I doubt it. But yeah, that's what today's discussion is. Mostly, is there mainly the questions we need to answer are: is there going to be something we think is going to take over from mainline cinema? Is there going to be just a change in mainline cinema, or is theater going to make a comeback? Probably not on the last one, is my guess. But
We can always hope.
we can dream. Personally, I feel like theater, or we've talked about this before a little bit before this. I think that film and cinema in the theaters and stuff is gonna end up transitioning to more home-centered streaming services, because with the whole pandemic that's happened, I don't think anybody wants to go to the movie theater anymore.
Right. And when you're really seeing that in all of the movies that are coming out right now. Especially.
Yeah, there's just not as many of them.
Well, they're not huge box office successes anymore.
Yeah, and you and I were looking up, was it Black Widow and In the Heights?
Well, yeah, I've been looking up those ones specifically, but yes.
And they are, not doing near as well as pre-pandemic box office numbers.
Right.
Well, I think, though, a fun thing that I heard actually from my parents when they went to go see Black Widow is that they kind of just felt like, oh my gosh, we're back in a movie theater. And it kind of became one of those, like, it's almost novelty again
Right.
to go
That's
to the
true.
theater. Which is kind of cool that we're able to be excited to go and get some popcorn and sit in the seats, especially the ones that recline. Those are the
Just
best.
Lean all the way back.
Yeah, but I definitely see what you guys are saying about like things shifting more to streaming, and it might just be that like going to the movie theater is a little bit more of a event rather than like, oh, let's get some tickets and go see this new movie that's come out.
Well, see, I almost see it as almost like what theater is currently, where it's like, oh, we're going to the theater. Like, that's the big thing. It's like, that could become the movie theater in a few years, where it's like, oh, let's go to the movie theater. Like, well, let's be fancy today. Let's go to the movie theater.
Cinema.
Go to the cinema. I'm going to put on the top hat and the bow ties.
Yeah,
I've brought out Mother's Best for this. It's quite a special occasion.
The other one that I find is like in movie theaters, because this totally unrelated. The reclining seats. Some of them are good, but for tall people, the reclining seats are actually too short. So my legs get like cut off at the calf, like half calf is where the recliner stops. And so my legs are like awkward. So I don't want to recline all the way back because they're not made for tall people. Kind of like airplane seats.
I don't have that problem in your situation.
Really?
That makes sense. But yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think, I don't know, I think movie theaters are going to become more of a novelty than a...
I would say if movies are going to be released, like with the premiere access, like they are kind of being released on the streaming services now, I'm like, what's the word? I can't remember the word. What was what we were talking about? Yeah. If you're getting like premiere access on all that kind of stuff, people aren't going to go to the theaters because, oh, I need to see this movie before someone spoils me on it, right?
Yeah.
Or like, oh, Avengers Endgame is released, and everyone went to the theaters because they're like, I need to know what happens.
Because you gotta know what happens before it goes up on Instagram that afternoon.
Everyone's like, hey, guess what happened? Let me tag all my friends in this post. And then you find out.
I haven't seen it.
Wait.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, everyone dies. Just,
It came out like 2 years ago.
man, I can't believe that.
And not everyone dies, technically.
I think like no one dies more or less in Endgame.
Someone dies.
Okay,
It's like, okay, there's
Two
like,
people.
there's 2 people that die.
but anyway,
Two significant people that die in Endgame.
the point I'm getting at with Endgame.
As opposed to Infinity War, where everybody died.
Oh my gosh.
Half the world.
It's 50%
Actually, the entire universe. Anyway.
of the entire universe.
Oh, I think my mic string caught up into my chin. Anyway, my point about bringing that up is that people would go to the movies because, I need to get this. I need to know what happens.
Yeah.
But now, if these movies are releasing on streaming services, people will be like, I can just stay at home, pay like an extra $20, invite my friends over, we can sit on my couch and watch the new movie that came out.
Yeah, and you can buy the popcorn for
It's more comfortable.
10%.
Yeah, you buy the popcorn from your local Walmart,
as the
not
movie
a sponsor, and you just pop it in your own microwave. You can go get more if you
You
want.
can even get pre-popped popcorn.
Yeah, you can buy a 2-liter soda for like half the price.
$2.
Yeah, of what you pay at the theater, and just watch the movie on your own at home. Sure, you're not watching on the big screen. You're not having the surround sound unless you're rich, but
I mean, how many people do have like nice TVs at this point? Because televisions are getting cheaper. And it's not like everybody has their little like 2 foot by 2 foot square TV at home.
Unless
And if
you're
you
a
go to the
college
movie
student.
theater, yeah.
it's called a phone at that point.
But even then, like a computer screen is better than that old like tube box with like,
Yeah,
or
for sure.
it's just, yeah. So it's easier, and I feel like also, I guess, in tangent to this, do you feel like shows are better for telling stories than movies? Because a lot of shows are becoming a thing, and like with Star Wars, a lot of people looking at it's like Star Wars is almost more fun as a TV show when you can have more time to explore things than in like a movie experience where you have this overarching narrative you got to follow. And I think people are starting to prefer like the television show on the streaming service, because like movies aren't super releasing on streaming services per se. Almost feel like there's a transition from movies to streaming shows as opposed to movies.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it depends on the story that you're trying to tell, because I think a lot of things, like you said, Star Wars, that seems like you have more time to explore all the different facets of it in a TV show, is because it has such a wide array of stories that can be told within that world that George Lucas created and then was built upon by others. And so, like, you have that opportunity then as a TV show to kind of, like, explore all these different things. But if it's more of a small, condensed story, maybe something a little bit, like, lower stakes, more on the emotional side, character-focused stories, especially ones that aren't necessarily huge fantasy epics and sci-fi, space operas, is that you can, condense that into a movie, that can be kind of how it's presented.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think with that, you could even have just smaller shows, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, with what Marvel's been doing with the limited series, with 6 to 10 episodes.
The number keeps going down.
So there's be
No,
2 episodes, miniseries, super miniseries.
we're supposed to be going up, not down.
So increasing the number, not lowering it. Dang it.
Yeah, but I do think having that ability to really, make it as long or as short as you need is really helping.
Oh yeah,
because you saw it
definitely.
in Star Wars, you saw it in certain movies that have come out aside from Star Wars, where the movie basically gets kind of railroaded into a certain way, and it kind of concludes a little quickly, or has to push plot points really fast because it has its certain running time. It's like a 2-hour whatever movie. Well, you need to hit A, B, C throughout the movie, and then it has to be done by the time the runtime of the movie is over.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is kind of also with book adaptations.
Yes.
Is that so many. There's been this whole culture of the book was better, obviously, because
Because you can fit 10 times the
can't-
material into the book.
Yeah, you can't fit that all into a 2-hour segment of film. And so I think, a lot of things are kind of going the way of, going towards shows with episodes and seasons rather than just individual movies for each book, like Game of Thrones. They're doing that with Wheel of Time coming out soon. That's not a sponsor, but it's a plug.
Nothing else.
Everything is a non-sponsor sponsor.
Everything is a non-sponsor. But yeah, because we can
Please
get to see,
sponsor
and
us.
like I've seen people thinking about like, oh, what if they rebooted Harry Potter as a TV show so that they could explore each book in so much more detail than before? Because there's so many fun little nuggets in there that just didn't quite have time to
Yeah.
be in the movies.
Mhm.
I think the problem Harry Potter would run into is Harry Potter was successful.
It was.
Yeah.
And I think we'd have a hard time looking at different people as the characters. And I don't know if they get as lucky with casting the second
Yeah.
time
It's true.
around when you have people who have to grow up during the movies. But I think
Yeah.
a show that needs to be redone, we've talked about this before, Percy Jackson.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because the movies failed so colossally. And my biggest
Yeah, no kidding.
thought on this, and the reason I think the movies failed, is because they left out the whole part of like what made Percy Jackson fun. Like what was the cool part of Percy Jackson? Was it fighting monsters? Was it lightning, ancient Greek gods? And that's all fun, but it was like, no, it was the camp Half-Blood. The whole thing was like, oh, like this cool camp. They've got the fancy t-shirts. They've got
Cool
like the
cabins.
cabins by like whoever your god is, unless you are like somebody who just doesn't want to
Gets
admit
shoved-
that you're there, so you
shoved
just get
into
thrown in the
Hermes.
Hermes cabin, which I always thought was funny. I'm like, that cabin has got to be enormous because that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then you have like the main three where it's like, well, we still have those cabins just because occasionally one of them shows up because they break their own rules. Because of
They're more
course
of a
Zeus
temple
does.
than a cabin.
Yeah, more of a temple than a cabin until someone has to sleep in. Then you're like, well, good luck sleeping in the alone, quiet room.
Yeah, with a giant
Bye.
statue of your parent
Yeah.
looming over you.
Looming over you. But like, none of that's in the movie.
No, it's not. None of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, they also just deviated very far from the plot,
Yeah.
creating their own less cool ideas. But
Yeah.
you know, it was a train wreck.
Yeah.
But that's also another thing that I thought about was that like with adaptations, my personal rule for adaptations is like, you know, you can deviate from the story, but make a good movie.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like there are a couple of different adaptations that I like, both the book and the movie separately.
Yeah.
I mean, I like The Princess Bride. I like Howl's Moving Castle, Guernsey Literary.
That's kinda how I feel with
Utopia
Harry
Pie
Potter, too,
Society.
yeah.
That too. Like you just kind of like them as separate entities because they're well made.
Mhm.
But yeah.
But there's a lot that aren't.
Yeah.
And there are some that are like subpar and you kind of forget they're like mediocre adaptation. I feel like Hunger Games was like that. The first one, at least for me, it was kind of like, it's kind of cool to see some of these things come to the thing, but not like it wasn't the best adaptation of it. So it was like, okay, but it was like kind of a different towards it as opposed to the ones where you're just like, this is a total failure on like 10 levels.
What are
Yeah.
you doing? Who let this happen?
I mean, I'm always of the opinion with shows that have original source material, like you're going to have stuff that gets cut from it. You're always going to have that. But I don't think I'm ever going to be fine with people adding things that weren't, like saying, oh, well, I'm just going to add this completely separate plot point that didn't exist in the original story. And especially when it goes against the characters' like personalities or, you know, their character, which I really feel like Percy Jackson did. Because I feel like in a lot of cases you get the director of the movie feeling like, oh, well, I have to make this my movie. Like, I am the director. I am the one who has the final say.
Looking at you, M. Night Shyamalan.
Well, I think normally it's because they're a director who's already established that they're like, hey, you're a good director, take this like project.
Ryan Johnson.
And it's
I mean-
like, it just becomes this whole mess of like, you're like, oh, I'm the director, I know best, I know this. It's like,
Right.
you're not listening to the fan base, you're not listening to like,
And that's the thing, is that they are good directors
yeah,
in their own projects, but when they
Right.
take
They get
on
the-
someone else's baby
yeah.
and try to make it their own baby, that's just not going to work. That's kidnapping.
Don't kidnap other people's shows, people. It's common sense.
Yes.
I mean, that was like, we were talking about like The Hobbit, where they added,
Oh.
I thought that's where you
Yeah.
were going when you said adding things, because I was like, we've put Legolas in here, which I mean, I always love more and more Orlando Bloom.
I
but come
forgot
on.
about The Hobbit, but yes,
And, like,
absolutely.
the White Orc, and just the elf lady.
Tariel.
which like it was okay, but it was like, why do we have this subplot that has no relevance on the arc? And
Peter Jackson's like, you know what would make Hobbit even better? A completely useless love story in the middle of it.
and
Has
just,
no bearing on the rest of the plot.
just like we want to like let's
Like, she's
Let's
cool. I
throw
like
this
seeing a
in.
redheaded elf.
that's that's great, but maybe make a Lord of the Rings series that has its own plot that you could do that in, because isn't that what they're doing, or are they
They
following?
are making a Lord of the Rings series again
they
on
following other
Amazon,
books?
but it's not even. I
Or
don't
they
know if
just
it's
make their
like
own?
Forgotten Tales or if it's like some original story that they're putting just back in the timeline before The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings happened.
Really?
Um,
Honestly, I feel like that could be not like that good of an idea, because Lord of the Rings is one of the things that has such an established lore.
yeah,
And such, like, 'cause you have the Silmarillion that's
you
outside
don't mess with it.
of it. And, like, Star Wars, sure, you can insert a story pretty much anywhere along
There's
the timeline.
a lot of timeline,
And you could just screw it with a few things and be like, oh, yeah, this fits in the timeline. I mean,
which is why it's kind of funny where they pick to do their new movies. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, because Star Wars has a lot of malleability when you're working on making a story in it. But Lord of the Rings, the like point A to the point B of the entire overarching story is so established. Like, you know what has to happen in all of it, that trying to introduce plot points, like say before Hobbit or even after Lord of the Rings, you're going to run into issues with people who actually know the lore. They're going to be like, wait a second, this isn't right.
That's not,
And so I do think it's a lot easier, like, to write stories within worlds that aren't as well, like where the lore isn't completely written out.
oh, 100%.
Also, kind of circling back around to what we expect will happen in the future and things like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is necessarily an expectation, but a hope, a wish that we have more original stories and more original content. Because
Would
right
be
now,
nice.
everything is a reboot
Remakes,
or an
yeah.
adaptation or a continuation or
Or
just
another
all
story
these
in
different
this
things.
world.
And it's like we have Fast and Furious 9 now, and like
And is it-
everything
is
is
it
a book
10 in the works?
adaptation.
You don't need
and-
original ideas when you got family.
Gosh, why? I hate that meme so much.
But no, you're
Oh.
absolutely right in
Yeah.
that. Like, oh, well, what are we getting? We're getting more, like, superhero films,
Yeah.
more, like, remakes. Oh, Disney's making another live action movie? Really big surprise.
based on one of their animated movies.
Yeah.
Well, in that same vein, there's even people making a whole bunch of movies on musicals. So they're taking
Yeah,
theater musicals
that's
and
Yeah.
making movies, and it just has never worked because
Yes.
theater is a live aspect.
Yes.
And I don't think
Yeah.
movie-going audiences are not interested in theater being put to screen.
Yeah, well, and also there's a whole thing that I've kind of looked into a lot about the problems with theater being translated into film, because a lot of times, especially with more fantastical stories that are on stage, is that the suspension of disbelief, especially when the characters start singing,
Yes.
is so much harder to maintain in a movie where everything looks more like an actual setting rather than a stage with a painted background,
Yeah.
because with by nature of a musical and a stage production,
There's a certain suspension of disbelief
you
that, like,
kind of have to just
sure.
be like, okay, I'm on board with this, like this is happening because this is a stage and these are people acting on a stage.
Yeah.
But in a movie, it's less so because people are kind of more in what looks like the real world.
yeah.
And it's harder
Yeah.
to really make it work.
Now, is that more of an issue of, like, being unable to, or is it an issue of movies being too realistic now? Like,
I think it's a duplicate because
Yeah.
I think if you have movies that are shot as more theater-esque,
Mm-hmm.
you lose interest quicker. There's an element of theater that it's like that
Yeah.
live aspect of being present
Yeah.
and being able to interact with people, like
Yeah.
interact.
'Cause I think
You're
movies-
personable
Yeah.
there.
I think movies are more about immersion
Yeah, that's
rather
fair.
than kind of like the experience of the live performance. So
Now,
it's-
to
yeah.
clarify, I am the one who does not know anything about theater. I am outside of that world. And so, I do think that is a good point, though, that with movies, like theater or movies based off of theater isn't necessarily going to sell to the theater people, because the theater people sometimes, if they want to watch theater, they're going to watch theater.
Yeah.
They're not going to be like, oh, well, this movie is theater, so it's obviously like a replacement, and it's not.
Mhm.
And then the movie, like, people who like movies, people who like to go, I like to go to the movies. They're not going to go to the movies and watch a movie that is literally just a recording
Oh,
of
yeah.
a stage play.
They might,
They might,
because those are cool.
but the vast majority of people aren't going to.
Yeah.
Most likely.
That's why they're those Phasma events instead of like a big,
Yeah.
like.
Well, they're like
Mhm.
a one weekend thing, not a box
Yeah.
office release. And I think even theater has the problem of like theater tends to be longer.
Mhm.
Like you'll have a 3-hour show with an intermission in between. Like Les Mis and some of those shows are hours and hours and hours of show.
Yes.
You can't pack that into a 1.5 hour movie. You've chopped off half the material. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
how
Well-
do you keep the integrity of the stage play if you're
Yeah.
knocking it down?
I just think of that with Les Mis. It's like Les Mis, the musical is already cut from the original book,
Yeah, and then
and
the
then if you cut
book.
that even more, you're missing
You're
out on even
losing so
more
much story.
material.
Oh.
But no, that is a point to bring up. Unless you want people going to 3.5 hour movies,
Yeah.
because
Which has been done.
I mean, yeah,
Lord of the Rings and how long is
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with
To
the
Avengers
Wind?
Endgame.
It's long.
It's long,
It's
yeah.
about 3.5 hours. Don't quote me on that.
it's long.
Somebody look it up.
It's too long.
How long is it? Our tech people have to look it up.
Someone please
Someone
Google
behind
it.
the
I feel
camera.
like there was some movie that was like an 8-hour like thing in the movie theaters.
There are movies that are that long.
but it
I
but it
think
was
also, like,
back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. Back in the day,
Yeah.
going to the movies was
When-
like a day-long event.
Well, and the movie
Mhm.
theater was the only air-conditioned building in the entire state.
yeah, yeah.
So it was like, of
Yeah,
course you
I
went to the
mean-
movie theater because it was stupidly hot outside. You could go watch movies for fun and get air conditioning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you have lunch
So-
in the middle of it, so
Yeah,
it's intermission. I
3 hours and 58 minutes.
58.
so it's almost
So it is
4
almost
hours
4
long.
hours. Gone with the Wind is 4 hours.
Oh,
Yikes.
So short answer, too long.
Too long. Yeah.
well,
I mean, I'll be honest. I go to a movie
Ooh.
theater and like 2 hours, and it depends on the movie, obviously.
yeah.
Like I went comparison here. Last Jedi. I went to Star Wars Last Jedi,
mhm,
which is like 2.5 hours.
gotcha.
It's still pretty long.
It's long, and I
For
was
Star
like
Wars
halfway through. I was like, I'm getting a little exhausted. Endgame,
Yeah.
Avengers Endgame, which is a little over 3 hours. Actually, didn't feel like 3 hours. Like I felt like that movie's pacing like went.
Yeah,
And so I was like, oh, it's
engaging.
over? Like,
Yeah.
okay. Whereas Last Jedi, I was like, oh, okay, can we move the plot along?
Uh-huh.
And then when you have 2 hours of, okay, can we move the plot along? You get bored.
Suddenly the movie's over. You're like, where did the plot go?
What happened?
We used 2 hours to cover a day.
Ugh,
Sometimes.
yeah.
But
But yeah. Oh, another thing that I would like to come back: animated movies, and not computer animated movies, but like 3D. No, sorry, 2D.
2D.
like
2D,
traditionally
traditional-
animated.
Traditionally 3D
Traditionally
animated
animated
movies.
I have a friend who just finished the animation program at UTD. Back in Texas, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, she's wanting to be a character designer, and she's really good. We chat all the time about stories and film and things. And a lot of her classmates, a lot of times when they have like animators come in to talk to their classes, a lot of her classmates are just like, when are they bringing animated movies back? Like, can this be a thing, please? Because I think, like, when Toy Story came out, the first one,
Yeah.
people went insane over 3D animation because it was new and it was cool and it cut down production costs and
Yeah.
things like that. When it's cool, it's a cool form of animation.
Yeah.
But like to replace the 2D animation with 3D animation, like it's not necessarily like one is better than the other. They're two different kinds of art forms,
Yeah.
and I feel like we've lost something, kind of
Yeah.
Culturally, just that we don't have these gorgeous animated movies anymore.
Yeah. And even like I was kind of, because with Space Jam, the new Space Jam coming out, I was like, oh, is this going to have like the like traditionally animated stuff? And it does for part of it. But they opted for the majority of having the characters on screen to just do them with CG computer animation.
Yeah.
And for the 2D animation, they brought back all of like a lot of old 2D Disney animators, people who worked on Lion King, people who worked on whatever other movies came out in that time.
Yeah.
Mulan. That's the other one I was thinking of. I'm like, what else came out alongside Lion King? I cannot remember. But I don't know if they're training people really in a lot of cases to do traditional animation.
I think a lot of people are kind of training themselves. I think a lot of people are self-taught these days, and I'm hopeful, and my friend's hopeful, that like because we have this rising generation that grew up on kind of the golden age of Disney and things like that, these wonderful animated movies,
Mhm.
that there will be a comeback as they kind of rise through the ranks of like, animation studios and things like that. They
Yeah.
will bring that back because nostalgia and also art and wonderfulness.
Yeah.
Well, there's just a stylistic thing about that just can't be replicated by 3D.
Yeah, there's so much more flexibility
Mhm.
and there's so much more that you can
Well, I
do.
always notice like the whole point of 3D anymore has become to mimic real life.
Mhm.
It's like, sure, it's stylized real life, but it's, we're making everything look as realistic as
If
possible.
you zoom in, you can see
Like,
individual
yeah.
threads on Elsa's jacket.
Yeah, that's actually what I was referring to when
yeah,
I've seen that.
yeah.
Where it's like, look at how amazing our 3D animation is, and it's like, who cares? Was Frozen 2 a good story?
Ooh, shots fired.
Shots fired Frozen 2.
We don't want to make enemies, guys. We've already called out.
Disney, we're coming for you. Don't
Oh,
send your
man.
legal team after us, because
Please.
I guarantee
We're
we've done
small
something
and
wrong.
poor.
This is just commentary.
Yeah, it's just
Ha, fair use.
Well, all we drew
Just
is
slap
talking
up a
about
picture
it,
of
right?
Mickey Mouse just to.
We'll just slap every copyrightable material on the screen at one point in time, and then we like,
Fair use. Ha!
well, it's only for half a second. Can't do anything about that. Ha ha.
oh boy.
At one
But-
point, one of these frames is Mickey Mouse. Try and find
But there's just something about 2D animation. I think a lot of it comes with like the squash and stretch.
Yes.
Like the 12 principles, completely forgotten by 3D animation.
Spider-Verse was very good.
Spider-Verse was a definite exception.
Yes.
Well, in Spider-Verse
To a
is
lot of that.
honestly a difference in technology or
stylized.
difference in
Yeah.
animation style or
Yeah.
technique, if you
They
will,
did a lot of
because
new things.
Yeah.
it
In
wasn't.
Spider-Verse, which made it so cool.
Well, there's another one. Have you seen the Van Gogh movie?
Yes, Loving Vincent. I saw that,
That they like drew
on my
it.
birthday a couple of years ago because that's when it came out, and it was gorgeous because every frame was an oil painting.
Yeah, so
and it is
like
amazing.
there are still movies like that, but they tend to get relegated to like
Special
lower
events,
special
sort of thing,
events,
yeah.
like film festivals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how long was it?
It was
Uh,
about hour and a half, I think.
yeah, hour and a half.
It's an hour and a
it is like
That's a lot of work. Oh my
It was like
gosh.
the life of Vincent Van Gogh,
Yeah,
as
it was
told by
about-
Vincent Van Gogh paintings, if you will.
Sort of,
Oh,
yeah. It was
yeah.
kind of, one of
Interesting.
kind of a character from one of his paintings
Yeah.
as like a real person trying to investigate how Vincent died and interviewing people that knew him. It was really cool.
So it's a pretty one, but
Interesting.
there are very few, and I think it's because the 3D is so easy as far as like it's low overhead.
The
like,
technology has come a long
and the
way.
thing is, when you start a new movie, like we just finished Frozen 2 at Disney. Now we're starting. What came after Frozen 2? Was it Raya and the Last
Was it
Dragon?
Raya and the
Raya?
Last
That was
Dragon.
probably the
There
next
might
one.
have been
I think-
something in between them, but
And there's an next Disney one. We'll say next Disney one.
yeah.
Basically, you go, okay, we're just gonna grab the Frozen 2 models, throw them over, like reshape them
The
just
rigging,
slightly.
yeah.
Well, they
And
probably
then, like-
ported the skeleton rig over.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But it's like that's so much that takes off like all of your pre-production time because you
Yeah.
don't have to do anything. You just have to
Yeah.
reshape the character slightly.
And I'm pretty certain all the dragons are literally just reskinned versions of each other.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
For sure.
They're palette swap. They're not.
They're palette swap with a few
Slight-
accessory
slightly
differences.
differently shaped
It's just My Little
horns.
Pony, but dragons.
They
Oh,
made the
boy.
horns My Little Pony.
I mean, I
Well, that's
enjoyed that
kind of what it
movie.
was.
I enjoyed that movie for sure.
It was
It's a
fun
good
But
movie.
yeah, it is a good movie. Yeah,
But-
but like
but the
definitely,
ease
like,
of it,
yeah,
like-
from the production standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing that in 2D, okay, we're making this new movie. Okay, we got to draw all the characters
Yeah.
and like animate them and do all these things. It's like you're starting from
Yeah.
ground up.
And also another thing I miss about the 2D animation and why I'm more into it myself is the just exaggeration of character design too. Like what happened to making like a character that's as big as a barge like Gaston, right?
Yeah.
Making someone who is like not realistic looking at all. Or having characters that like basing them off of shapes. We don't like all the characters now are so realistic looking.
We'll take like Phineas and Ferb, Gravity Falls, where it's like you have triangle head. It's like
Yeah.
nobody has a triangle head. You see those like
Don't have
abominations where people do a realistic
Yeah.
depiction of Phineas and Ferb, and you're like, oh god,
It's like, oh my god.
It's not
Why?
meant to be realistic. It's like The Simpsons too.
Yeah.
You can't take The Simpsons and make them look realistic because like it just doesn't look
where
good.
is Bart Simpson's hair?
Yeah. Is it his hair or is it?
I'm convinced he just has a spiky skull.
Yeah, probably. Simpsons.
Homer
is weird,
Simpson
man.
has hair, right?
Yeah, he does.
I
As
don't
does
really watch
Marge.
Simpsons, so Bart is just take out the spiky head genetics.
The biology is a mystery.
It's a
but nobody cares because
recessive
it's
gene.
2D animated.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And,
Well-
and we can suspend our disbelief. Yeah.
And it's kind of that. I don't know if I would describe it as like absurdity necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's just there's something about those designs that you can't do in 3D.
Yeah.
Because 3D is the pursuit of
It's
realism.
terrible.
Mhm.
But when because a lot of 2D animated stuff is based off of shapes.
Yeah.
And I just feel like a lot of that is missing in 3D.
Mhm.
Oh, for sure.
Another thing I would mention about 3D animation though
Mhm.
is that it does sell.
It does.
It does, yeah.
For the principle of appeal, 3D animation usually hits the mark.
Well, and there's a reason we talked about earlier why film went away from theater. Because originally film was just shooting theater
Yeah.
with a camera.
Right.
Because we didn't know any better because we just planted the camera somewhere and shot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we started mimicking real life because that is what people like to watch. People are interested in that. But going to like the idea of streaming and stuff, I think that's opened the door for some of the 2D animation to make a comeback
Yeah.
because there's not as much of a risk to it, if you will.
Yeah. Like if you got the subscription already, why not?
Yeah, the streaming and the streaming service is already getting paid regardless of if you watch, say,
Yeah.
like Gravity Falls and Disney Plus.
Mhm.
The streaming service, you're paying for the streaming service already, so
Mhm.
they're making the money there.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether or not you click on watching Gravity Falls or not.
Yeah.
There is a need to have things that pull people to the platform,
Yeah.
but there's also just a need to fill out the platform so you can be like, hey, we've got thousands of shows.
Yeah.
So I think that streaming platforms will help
Mm-hmm.
2D animation a little bit at least.
I hope.
And there's definitely creators that are using it.
Well, and there is 2D animated content being produced.
There is.
Like a lot of it is because it's very much relegated to television
Mhm.
and or even shorts.
Yeah.
Like Pixar's been making 2D animated short films. Not at least they're
Mhm.
stepping out of their comfort zone, right?
Mhm.
But they're shorts.
Mhm.
And then even a lot of the TV shows, because you see a lot of 2D animation on Adult Swim,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is really,
Lazy.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't want to
that's the
call
other
it
problem.
lazy,
Or
but
even like
there's just like a character will just
Well-
stand there while another character's talking. Like characters don't
It's cheap.
move. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's cheaper.
It's
You
cheap
can-
animation.
also the character design is horrendous. Like
Oh.
they're like, let's make our characters look like awful, terrible, deformed people. Like
Yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
up
We've-
the ugly factor.
We're just doing
That's definitely Adult Swim.
oblong. It's the,
And then
the new shape.
I do feel like Disney's taken some risks with their 2D recently.
Mhm.
I think it's still fairly simple. Like, because the character designs are pretty flat for the most part. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we give them a singular hair color, which is pretty typical, but
that's pretty.
but it's usually
pretty
like one line, another line, hair.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I've actually really
yeah.
loved Owl House's designs.
Oh, yeah.
To be clear.
Mhm.
And I actually think they've followed Gravity Falls in the sense of
Yeah.
being more unique in their designs, not copying Gravity Falls,
Right.
Mhm.
but having unique characters as opposed to just like some of the other TV shows.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Cartoon Network, their current lineup, it's hard to tell which show is which because they all look the same.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't really paid much attention to Cartoon Network.
I just see it on Instagram and stuff. It's like
yeah,
the new Ben 10 reboot, the Teen Titans Go, like those ones, and the characters look the same.
Well, it's you swear it's just a reskin model, like the same character model or whatever, just reskinned.
Yeah.
I know I probably redundanted myself right there, but I forgot what I was saying, so I had to repeat myself.
Yes.
Anyway, redundanted.
Yes.
Redundant.
Add that to the
It's
dictionary.
Not a word.
Redundified?
Redundant.
Call me up, Oxford. I'm smart. Anyway,
I'm smart. I can make words.
I'm smart. But what was I saying?
The characters all look the same.
Tears look
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think they do any rotoscoping.
Yeah.
Because nowadays with digital animation, like when you're not actually drawing on paper, it's a whole lot easier to
Oh,
not have
yeah.
to rotoscope.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, well, this character is made up of a circle. Like their head is a circle, and this is how big their arms are. And the characters aren't unique at all. You basically just take
Just copy paste.
I just think of like, you know, those pop figures, those Funko Pops.
Funko
I think
Pops.
of
Oh, man.
those, and they basically take them and then
Just
for whatever
skin.
character they just skin the Funko
Yeah.
Pop. Now for Funko Pop, I understand that. I understand. I understand why they'd want to just take it and put like
Yeah.
the whatever on it to make
Slap
it look like
Captain
the character.
America on
That's
it.
what
Yeah.
makes a Funko
Like
Pop.
give it like a
Iron
little
Man.
mask and like a little symbol on it, and you can just switch it around. But that's what it feels like in a lot of modern television animation is just, oh well, here's the character base. If for those people who are artists, you know all about like bases, where it's, oh, I made this character base of a pose doing this, and then you just draw on top of it what you want your character to look like. That's what it feels like.
It's like downloading that when you can't figure draw, so you download a template from the
Yeah,
internet
that too.
for your costume design assignment.
I took a year of figure drawing. I still can't figure draw, but
It's hard.
it is hard. But
So props to you, artists.
yeah,
Unless you cheat and download it from the internet like I do.
yeah.
Then
But
we're
if
on
you
the
do, we
same
understand.
skill level.
Anyway, it just because, oh well, this character we give him a different hairstyle, different eye color, different outfit, done. But the base of the character is the same.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like that's just a current issue.
Yeah. And I think that's...
And there are some that are deviating from that because I think it's been a thing for a while. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about like the first Frozen movie where Anna, Elsa, and their mom basically all look the exact same,
Well, I
but
mean,
just
they
a
are.
couple of different changes.
They're related.
They are related, but like they're triplets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
But,
some dominant genetics.
And they look like Rapunzel.
Oh my gosh.
From-
Rapunzel had bigger eyes.
Tangled.
But but like again, Spider-Verse did a very good job of diversifying their character designs, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Even when they were all Spider-Man.
Or
to
even when one
extent
of
or
them
another.
was a big square.
Yeah.
I love Kingpin's design in
It was
Spider-Verse.
so great.
He is so unbelievably big,
Yes.
but it's fun.
Yeah, it is. And you're like, yeah, oh yeah,
Has to
that's
go through
Kingpin. Like
doorways,
if you watch
sideways.
like the Spider-Man cartoon, like
Yeah.
back in
Yeah.
the early, late 90s, early 2000s, like that was really cool. And like at least that's when I watched it. I don't know if that when it was made. But yeah, it's just lots of I think Big Hero 6 did a good job with like diversifying their
Yeah.
character designs. And
Was
things.
more unique things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I think, in some ways, I think this isn't necessarily a recent problem.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've always had trouble with like diversity with things. It's just that we remember the ones that stood out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like we think about like, oh, the shows in the past that we liked. It's like we don't remember the 20 other shows that existed that were all the same
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they were the same. So it's like, why remember this show when
Yeah.
we had our favorite that went out on a limb and did something different?
Yeah.
Right. For sure.
Well, like, because had this thought while you were saying it, like old movies, old horror movies, like black and white horror movies.
Like,
Sometimes,
Alfred Hitchcock.
like, you come down and watch
Yeah.
a movie, like, say, like, families downstairs watching on the TV. You come down and you're like, oh, what movie is this? They're like, oh, well, it's the, like, there was one recently. It was like the living head or something.
Oh yeah. We were watching that.
I like come
So
down and I
weird.
see that and I'm like, what is this movie? And then I'm like, is it this one?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't. There were so many movies back then that were made exactly like that.
Yeah.
That you look at the different ones and you're like, I can't see the difference.
Not to mention the fact that a lot of them probably hired the same actors to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, and then also just the same like facial expressions and body language, like
Yeah.
the whole like.
And so you come down, you're like, what horror movie is this? Does it matter? No, because they're all identical.
Yeah.
There's all some monster that's got like a whole bunch of things that can't quite move because it's got too much stuff on it.
Yeah,
And
like
it's just
it
a
kind of like
person in a
twitches a
suit.
little bit, here
Yeah.
and there, like the fingers.
Maybe if it's got like a little bit of like wiggle to it, it has
Yeah.
like some
And it just like walks
freakiness
like
to it. But like the mouth
Yeah.
never moves because the whole head is locked
I'd be
in like
pretty
this
scared,
big
honestly.
latex whatever
It's
with like teeth locked in it.
yeah.
It's just,
Well, it's like the hula hooping ancient goddess in Suicide Squad.
I've not
like-
seen Suicide
We-
Squad.
I
I've
have
never
not
seen
seen
that movie.
Suicide Squad either, but I know about the hula hooping
I
ancient
did
goddess.
not know there was a looping ancient goddess in Suicide
She moves
Squad.
her hips that way. So we're talking about like terrifying dancing monsters.
Oh,
Oh
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We're like we've not seen.
I've
this.
not seen it because I don't really care.
Have I lost you?
but I think like movies, yeah, just the idea of there's always been a lack of diversity in thought because once somebody does something in a movie that's cool,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people pile on the train to be like,
Yes.
whoa. There was one
Yeah.
recently, I was watching some like how to cinematography stuff, and one was like racking focus. So when you take an object, like you're shallow depth of field, you're focused on an object that's close or far, either or, and then you change the focus to be on the other object. So like if someone's like looking back and like you're focused on their face, they look back and it focuses on an object behind them.
Yeah.
That's racking focus. It's really cool when done well. Once the DSLR came out and every student filmmaker could rack focus, they were racking focus every shot, which makes it just terrible. So it's like people will make diversity and then everyone will pile in on it because it was like, that did so well.
They're like, look at this cool experimental thing. Everyone's like, oh, let's copy that.
Yeah.
And
Kinda
so
reminds me of all
then
those
it becomes
Marvel
commonplace and then we're like, oh, can they come up with something new?
Well, I would argue that happens in a lot of different things.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
not
Oh,
even,
yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
yeah,
that
yeah,
like
yeah, just in
animation,
general.
it's not a new problem.
Yeah, it's not a new problem. But like,
So-
yeah, I mean, when
problem.
Suzanne Collins wrote The Hunger Games,
Mhm.
everyone was like, okay, YA dystopian
The amount
science fiction, you know,
of
like let's do it.
dystopian
Why
books.
dystopian fanfic? I mean,
had
dystopian
to
novels.
read.
With societies divided into groups based on certain attributes.
I had to read so many of those in high school.
And you gotta have a love triangle.
Yes, but then also like, I mean, I even like I listened to this podcast called Writing Excuses. Go check it out. And it's I think Howard Taylor was talking about how Twitter is the land of low-hanging fruit.
Really?
Because like someone will say something will happen on Twitter, and then thousands of people will make the same joke. You scroll through the comments on it, and it's just the same joke over and over again, like slight varieties of it. But everyone's like, oh, like yes, dive into it. Like
I gotta get on.
yeah.
It's. I
gotta
also
be
feel
part
that
of
way
this.
about like memes and stuff. Like one person will make a meme and it's like, oh, that was really creative, and then you will see 2,000 other
Yes.
versions of that meme or the TikTok. Oh, TikTok is the worst for this because it makes it so easy. You have a song. I hope TikTok is not the future of entertainment because oh boy. But it's like you have a song and it's like, man, this song's
It's a
kind of
bad
catchy.
ending.
Somebody makes a very fun, cool video. Then everybody else makes a video with the same thing.
Yeah, I mean it's fun.
Yeah,
I mean I don't
just
have TikTok,
gets
but I can
repetitive.
understand the fun.
I don't. I just see
Yeah.
enough
Yeah.
of it on Instagram.
Well, it's the trends. It's when like,
Yeah.
and it's just trends as a basic thing. When somebody does something new and it takes off, people think, "Oh, this is cool." It becomes a trend, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it means when people start doing the things that other people have done. And it's really seeing success and taking success and trying to replicate said success by doing the same thing that the person who got the success did.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you really want to be successful, you've got to steal somebody's idea before they put it out.
Ah, yes.
Well, here's the thing. This is something that I've seen talked about a lot in like writing circles and things
Yeah.
like that about the concept of originality and how like I mean you've read this book in high school called Reading Literature Like a Professor and how basically everything is derivative these days in
Oh,
some
yeah.
way. But the thing about it is that don't just copy,
Yeah.
but like take a trope, take a
Take elements.
yeah,
and-
take elements, put your own spin on it. Like
Yeah.
maybe like try to combine things in a way that hasn't been seen before. Tell a story that is familiar but with your own flavor. Because like, being derivative is not bad. You just got to know how to spin it
Yeah.
and put your own flavor on it. Copying bad.
Yeah.
Derivation fine.
Stealing, great.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason you have like
We do not
teachable
condone
concepts.
theft.
Like you
Yay,
can
criminality.
you can teach like this is how to tell a good story. This is how to
Yeah,
because there are things that work. And like there are tried and tested things like a story that's been told
Yeah.
like the hero's journey.
Yeah.
It's like if you were to say, "Oh, you've copied the hero's journey again." Like, well, if you don't do the hero's journey, people hate your movie because they can't follow it.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that like if something were completely original,
Yeah.
people would hate it because there is no familiarity. There is no like they're just like what the heck is this?
Like watch a movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you're just spending the whole movie. You're like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
There's
I'm
some
afraid I
fun
can't do
moments
that,
to it,
Dave.
but you're like, "That is like the most straightforward part of the movie." Then you're like, "Why is there a space baby? What do these monoliths mean? Why does the monkey be smacking things with bones?
And yet it's a classic.
Why is there this
What is
creepy like room that like this white room that stuff's happening and people are saying the weirdest things?"
But it was
It
a
doesn't
spectacle.
make sense. Yeah,
was
it's
a
a beautiful
spectacle, though.
spectacle, and the director's name definitely pushed it through. And but it's not one where you're like, "Man, I want to watch a movie." Let's watch 2001. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, there are movies that are like,
There's
whoa, like that was so cool, but you never feel like you want to rewatch it.
no.
But then there are movies that are just like, I like this so much. Like this is, it's like the whole concept of like comfort movies
Oh, yeah, comfort
and
movies.
things like that. Like I think House Moving Castle is my comfort movie because I have seen that so many times. I could quote it from beginning to end. But yeah, it's just, different types of stories, different types of filmmaking. I just hope to see a little bit more originality in the sense
Yeah.
of people doing their own things and not necessarily following the
Yeah.
trend.
And I think the big thing that's preventing that is the overarching like companies. There's fewer and fewer companies that are making movies,
Yeah.
and so.
It's
But-
all being
But now what we're
absorbed into
seeing
the
is
Disney
we're seeing
conglomerate.
more and more people striking out on their own, kind of like we're doing, kind of
Yeah.
like other people are doing. Like, how many people do I know in like my graduating group where it's like we're all trying to start our own things because
Mm-hmm.
it's like none of us want to go into this career field that's been dominated by like 3 companies.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely a change coming, if you will, of like this group that's coming in that has a lot more tools than past ones did. Because if you think about like our grandparents, if they wanted to be a filmmaker, I mean, what was our set's falling apart?
Oh no.
Hey.
What was like your
Technical
technology
yeah.
that you had available to you
Yeah.
40 years ago,
Mhm.
or even like 20 years ago? Like
Yeah.
when we were little, I remember I got like a whatchamacallit,
Like a digital camera.
like a digital camera that
Yeah.
had video. It had like 720 video. Actually, no, I think it only had 360. The first one I got, I think it only had 360, and it was like, oh, this is glorious. Like we are filmmakers, man. And so we're doing this with like this crappy tiny camera.
Oh,
It's like,
man.
yeah, that's not.
I made videos with an otter puppet one time when my brothers were like out like at scout camp or
Yeah.
something, a mountain man retreat or something, and it was just me alone in the house with my parents. And I just set up the camera and just like did a little otter with a
Yeah.
goofy voice. His name was Pablo.
Yeah.
It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Paul and I used to make movies with our Webkins.
Oh, yeah.
Our little stuffed
So
Webkins.
Stuffed animals.
So we had this whole run of Webkins movies, almost like the Muppets. Like
Yeah.
they were essentially Muppets.
I mean,
And-
yeah, they're just.
I don't know. We'd have to find those.
I don't know if
Post them
we
on
have
the
them.
studio, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have them or
Yeah,
anywhere.
we'd have to dig them up or something.
Find
but-
the old computer they're on.
Well, I think we'll know that things are going the right direction when we start seeing headlines like millennials and Gen Z have ruined the film industry by
Yes.
creating their own stories.
They're not going into the film, people.
Yeah.
They're making their own stories on YouTube. What is this?
Yeah.
What is this?
And then we'll be like,
nonsense?
oh, wealth of content.
Exactly.
And it's all cool and personal and
Well, and that's even, like,
lovingly made.
the beauty of YouTube
Yes.
and like for example, a camera we have shooting this is like 1080p and it's digital, so we can just chuck footage if we need to.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not costing us anything to record
Mhm.
the footage. And so it's like it's so easy, and then we just upload it to YouTube, which is a service that we can do, and it's like, and then people can watch it for free with just ads. So it's like the fact that it's so accessible
Yeah.
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
great, because it could mean that someone could decide, I want to make a 2D animated something, or I want to make this kind of a movie. I mean, we're learning that it's incredibly hard to make bigger projects, but there's more small projects you can do.
Yeah.
And little fun things, or try with like different mediums, different things. I have a friend who's doing like a space simulator web series where you can, I don't know, space simulators are kind of weird because I think they are more of a local thing. But you basically go in and you pretend to be like a Star Trek bridge crew. Have you ever been to these?
No, but I've heard. I think
never
I've
been
heard
to
about
them?
it. I think I've heard about it.
Okay, they're really fun.
Yeah.
Basically you get to go there. Someone's the captain, someone's like the other captain, and there's like a pilot, a weapons officer, like a security person who gets a gun,
Yeah.
the medic, the engineer. Like
My brother might have done
everything.
that for like his bachelor party or like a
Yeah.
friend's bachelor party.
they're
or
so
something
fun.
like that.
But like, and then the people at the place like play the computer and the bad guys you run into and the events, and
Yes.
it's just such a cool experience. But he's basically taking it and being like, okay, we're gonna make that. You can have a show, and then people can also like come in and do the space simulator as well in his world that he's creating. And it's like, that's such a cool idea.
Yeah.
But given like, take that 20 years ago, it would have been impossible because A, you can't film it because all you have is film cameras, which,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, are expensive. Like, our parents' stuff, like, our childhood videos are all recorded on, like, camcorders.
Yeah.
With the, like,
Tapes.
film, the tape that goes through it.
You have
and
to like
it's,
do the process to get it transferred over to like
and
a
then if you, like,
DVD and-
you like leave the tape out, the kid finds it and just like pulls the tape
Yeah,
out, and
it's
you're
like,
like, "Oh
what does this
no!"
do?
years worth of family memories.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I ruined a
treasured
few tapes when I
memories.
was younger, just because it's like, "Oh, I gotta pull it." Like, it's just so fun to pull out. And
No, you cannot blackmail me, mother.
no future videos of me.
It's like your future self goes back in time into your toddler body. Gotta
Starts
destroy the
tearing
evidence.
tapes out. But it's just like, could you imagine? Like, yeah, and even like our grandparents. Oh, forget about it. They didn't
Yeah.
We
handle
had like a Super 8
personal
camera.
cameras. Yeah.
Yeah.
They could they had like a specific point that you couldn't even focus. Like,
Yeah.
and they were like this big. We found one in our grandparents' house that was like this big block. It had this like, it basically took like a VHS tape. You put like a VHS tape in the side, and it was like over the shoulder. Like, it looked super cool, but I'm sure it's shot in film,
Yeah.
and so it was
Yeah.
on cheap film.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we have all this technology now, you can buy, like, if you really want to, you could use your phone. Like, your phone
Yeah.
camera is 100 times better than anything from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
That was like cutting edge.
Yeah, that was like the ones they were using for some of the bigger budget things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the ease of access now
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of fun, kind of terrifying, but
Yeah. I mean, it feels
it means
like
a lot of people can make a lot of crap.
yeah,
But
we'll sift through it, I guess.
it also is easy enough to dodge some of the crap.
But as,
Just don't click on
with you have more people making more stuff. Like people, it's more accessible. People are able to upload more stuff. People, I think I've said this to you before, have the ability to be selective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think really in the case of when you had movies coming out, when you had maybe, I don't know, 2 movies releasing in a year,
Yeah.
people would be like, oh, I want to go to the movies, but there's only
That's kind of
I can go watch this or I can go watch this. I mean, that is how it feels right
Yeah,
now. But
yeah.
but if now you also can pull up YouTube. You can
Yeah.
watch like a video of, I don't know, Mr. Beast giving away money if you want.
Yeah.
Or you could watch someone's animated short.
Or even pull up streaming service, one of
But-
the streaming services you own, and watch something on there.
Back in the day when there was only two to watch, you'd watch it even if it was absolute garbage. Just because it was like, oh, I want to go to the theaters and watch
I wanna watch
something.
Yes.
But now, when people are able to be more selective with things, I think that they actually have the ability to determine what is good. And of course,
Yeah.
it's going to be different for each person.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone has their
Like,
own
oh,
tastes.
like this person thinks this is good. This person thinks this is good. And I really think it's going to allow for other people. I mean, certain people will be successful doing things that they wouldn't be able to be successful doing. And in a lot of cases, I think audiences are the judge of whether something is good or not.
Yeah.
Which always goes back to the whole, movies and blaming.
The
Oh.
Academy.
Right now, movies are blaming streaming services for not doing well at the box office. They're like, oh, these streaming services, they're ruining the industry.
It's like, well, you got to either make better things that draw people in. I mean, like we
Yeah.
talked about the whole millennials ruining the industry or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
well, they're changing it. It's
Yeah.
it's not ruining, so but it might
It's
ruin
not
it. But
necessarily a sacred tradition that we
film
are
ruined the theater
desecrating,
industry
you know?
more or less. So
Yeah.
These kids
That's
don't want
just
to
how
go
it
to the
goes.
theaters
Yeah.
anymore. They don't want to make the trek to the
It's-
theaters. Like, I used to have to walk uphill both ways to go to the movie theater.
in the heat of
Good
the
for
day,
you. I'm sure that you built up your leg muscles very
gotta
well.
pull out the. This is a little bit of a side note, but I
Oh.
saw a funny one that was like the whole idea of like ancestors being ashamed that we have it easy, and it was like, but
Oh,
it was turning that on its head of being like ancestors being happy that we can be like that we
Yeah.
have food,
Yes,
that we
they
have
have
like our technology and stuff, and it was
Ease
like
of access.
being
Yeah.
excited that like, oh, our daughter can do all these amazing things.
She's
She
doing
can
so well.
she can communicate with all of her friends instantaneously, like
I
without
had to
having to
wait
write
5
letters.
months for my stupid pigeon to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was like kind of the idea of like technology is not bad.
Yeah.
It's a tool. It's how
Yeah.
you use it.
And I feel like also kind of the attitude of just like our generation had to struggle, so you should struggle too, or else you're not valid. But like, why don't we just try to make things easier for those who come
For
after
everybody?
Yeah.
us?
Mhm.
You know?
Improve the world
Yeah.
instead of ruining it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so let's also improve the film industry, everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the ability to just have multiple access.
Yeah.
Is just that like it makes it super easy to do it and to put forth projects in various mediums and in different things. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, YouTube has also allowed people to produce content very, very cheaply and get a lot of success off of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I really do think YouTube is a very good thing for independent creators.
Yeah.
Totally.
And the beauty of it is when you have people, and these going back to the whole, people need to be more original, people need to have more, is the people that really care about what they're making.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the big stuff and the big industries have lost the care. And I even see it in like theater and stuff, which is like a lesser, and you'd think that people would have that like deep care about their art and what they're creating. But in reality, a lot of people are just like, oh, it's making money. Like that's cool. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's that like desire to create, and that's what's being given now is like a lot of people who are like, man, I want to make something.
Yeah.
Now have the tools to make it.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
really
cool.
Yeah, and I feel like there are a lot of very talented animators on YouTube that I've seen.
Oh, yeah,
People
for
just
sure.
like putting out like proof of concept videos for personal projects that they did on their free time, and it's just
Yeah.
mind blowing the kind of stuff that people do.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. I mean, it's a very cool thing that we have now these days, that we can make these things for so much less of a sacrifice than other people, and so people don't feel like they like necessarily have to give up either their creativity, their aspirations, or give up, something that's a little bit more practical.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be the starving artist anymore.
No.
And you also don't have to be the repressed artist who is stuck at a desk job and losing their
Yeah.
mind. It's we have options now.
There's options and you just have to work on it.
Gotcha.
Well, that's I think all we've got time for today. Thank you guys for joining us on this, and thank you guys for watching. Make sure you share it. Make sure you're sending it to all the people you know. We also have some videos for you to watch. Up here is going to be one that YouTube knows you're going to love and watch. And right here is going to be our second short film that we worked on, Words of an Old Friend, that was directed by one of my other friends. So go give that one a watch as well. And make sure you like and subscribe while you're at it. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!
Bye.
Bye.